What if the golden cage that millions dreamed of was actually a place of terrible nightmares for its inhabitants? We are used to seeing the Gilded Age through the prism of glittering ballrooms, rustling silks, and the flawless smiles of ladies in portraits by great artists. However, behind the heavy velvet curtains of Fifth Avenue mansions lay a completely different reality, full of coldness, alienation, and silent screams. Women whose lives were envied by the whole world often fell asleep in tears, fearing not ghosts, but their own husbands and endless loneliness. Their bedrooms were not boudoirs of love, but waiting rooms where time dragged on agonizingly slowly. This side of history remained in the shadows for a long time, hidden behind facades of marble and gilding. Watch the video to the end, and you will learn how luxurious interiors became the backdrop for personal tragedies that were kept secret even in confessionals. What if I told you that everything you believed about the romance of old-fashioned weddings is not true? For a young girl from high society, her wedding day often became a day of farewell to her own personality and the beginning of a life lived by someone else's rules. She entered her husband's house not as the mistress of the house, but as a precious acquisition that was supposed to decorate the interior and silently perform her duties. Huge halls filled with expensive vases and antique furniture greeted her with a deathly coldness and silence, broken only by the footsteps of servants. She was to spend her whole life within these walls, but she did not have the right to move even a chair without her husband's approval. The first night in a new home rarely resembled the scenes from romance novels that young ladies of that time loved to read. Often, the groom was much older, more cynical, and viewed marriage solely as a deal to merge capital. The young wife, raised in the strict Victorian traditions of ignorance, felt not excitement, but a real animal fear of the unknown. The bedroom door closed, cutting her off from her familiar world, her family, and her past. In the dim light of the gas lamps, her husband's face seemed strange and frightening, turning into the mask of an authoritarian master. The luxurious bedding made of the finest Irish linen did not warm her, but seemed like an icy shroud. Every fold in the blanket, every glint of light on the polished wood of the furniture was etched into her memory forever. Instead of words of love, she often heard only dry instructions, or worse, encountered complete indifference. Romance died before it was born, giving way to heavy duty and shameful silence. In the morning, she had to come down to breakfast with perfect hair and a smile, hiding the traces of a sleepless night. Society demanded a flawless facade from her, and she learned to wear this mask from the very first hours of her marriage. The servants looked at her with polite indifference, knowing that she was just another cog in the machinery of this huge house. She had to learn a complex code of conduct where any wrong move could provoke her husband's anger. Fear of her husband often became a constant companion for the young woman, replacing respect or affection. She was afraid to say a word too many, afraid of displeasing him, afraid to simply be herself in her own home. This fear permeated every corner of her consciousness, making her flinch at the sound of the front door opening. Evenings turned into torture as she waited. What mood would the master of the house be in when he returned? Over time, the fear dulled, turning into a dull melancholy and apathy that became a familiar backdrop to life. The women learned to find solace in small things, in religion or in rare meetings with friends. But that first night, full of coldness and alienation, left a permanent scar on each of their souls. It was the moment when they understood the true price of their position in society. I'm very interested to hear your point of view. What do you think? Was such a luxurious life worth such mental anguish and loss of freedom? Write about it in the comments. Are you ready to learn the truth about why spouses slept in separate rooms in wealthy homes? The layout of mansions during the Age of Splendor was designed not to bring the family closer together, but to separate its members as much as possible. Architects designed houses so that each spouse had their own separate territory, securely protected by doors and corridors. The husband's bedroom and the wife's bedroom were often located in different wings of the house or separated by a series of dressing rooms. This was considered the height of propriety and aristocracy, but in reality it only reinforced the emotional divide. This architecture dictated its own rules of relationship, where a husband's visit to his wife became a formal event. He did not need to knock, but the distance between the rooms created a psychological barrier. The woman never knew if he would come today, and this anticipation exhausted her nervous system. She lay in her huge, luxuriously decorated bed and listened to the footsteps in the corridor. The male half of the house was decorated in dark colors, with the smell of tobacco and leather, symbolizing power and seriousness. The female half was light, filled with lace and trinkets, resembling an elegant cage for a rare bird. These two worlds existed autonomously, touching only when necessary or at the whim of the master. The doors between them could be locked, but the key was always with the man. Separate bedrooms were justified by hygiene and comfort, but in reality they served as a tool of control. A woman had no right to come to her husband without an invitation. It was considered a breach of etiquette and a sign of promiscuity. She was the passive party who could only wait and hope for attention. This humiliating position made her feel like an object that was taken out of a box only when the owner needed it. On cold winter nights, the distance between rooms seemed like an endless frozen field. The fireplaces in the bedrooms were lit, but they could not dispel the bone-chilling cold of loneliness. Women wrapped themselves in shawls and down comforters, trying to keep warm, but the inner chill did not go away. The luxury of the interior only emphasized the emptiness that reigned in their lives and in their beds. For many women, their bedroom was the only place where they could take off the mask of well-being. Here, away from the eyes of their husbands and society, they could be weak, tired, and unhappy. But even this solitude was permeated with anxiety and anticipation of the inevitable intrusion. The room was not a refuge. It was a place of confinement with the most expensive decor. The architecture of these houses perfectly reflected the essence of marriages at that time. A beautiful facade and complete disconnection inside. The space worked against feelings, creating physical barriers to any spontaneity or tenderness. People lived in a maze of rooms that helped them avoid each other for decades. Isolation in their own bedrooms led to depression and nervous disorders in many society ladies. They would stare at the ceiling for hours, studying the moldings and thinking about the years they had lived aimlessly. In the next chapter, you will learn what every morning in front of the mirror turned into for them. Guess how long it took to create this perfect, corseted body? A socialite's morning did not begin with coffee in bed, but with the exhausting ritual of transforming herself into a living statue. The dressing table was an altar on which she sacrificed her comfort and health every day. Maids tightened the corset with such force that her ribs cracked and her breathing became shallow and intermittent. This process was not just a tribute to fashion, but a strict requirement of social status that could not be disobeyed. A thin waist was a symbol of discipline, wealth, and belonging to the highest circle of the elite. A woman looked in the mirror and saw her body changing shape, becoming unnaturally fragile. Back and stomach pain became her constant companion, which she had to get used to as an inevitability. Each layer of clothing worn over the corset added weight and restricted movement even more. Numerous petticoats, bustles, and whalebone bodices turned her into an unwieldy structure. She could not bend over freely, take a deep breath, or simply relax in a chair. Her body no longer belonged to her. It was packed into an expensive wrapper for display to society. Her hairstyle required no less time and torment than dressing in a complex, multi-layered outfit. Hot curling irons often burned her scalp and neck, leaving painful marks. Heavy knots of hair, secured with dozens of pins, caused constant headaches by the end of the day. But not a single strand was allowed to fall out, for carelessness was considered an unforgivable sin. The maids who helped her dress knew every spot on her body and every wrinkle on her face. They witnessed her physical suffering, but silently did their job, tightening the laces. During these hours, the boudoir was filled not with the scent of perfume, but with the smell of sweat and stifled moans. Beauty demanded sacrifices, and these sacrifices were made daily, without weekends or holidays. When the ritual was finally over, the woman felt encased in armor that protected her from the outside world. She was ready to meet her husband, guests, and enemies without betraying her pain with a single gesture. The corset kept her back straight, even when she wanted to double over in despair. It was a cage she wore, a cage sewn from the finest satin and lace. A glance in the mirror before leaving the bedroom was the final check of readiness for the battle for social survival. She saw a beautiful doll there, but the doll's eyes often remained empty and sad. The reflection did not lie, but no one wanted to see the truth hidden behind layers of expensive fabric. Like this if you are also struck by the torment women went through to conform to the standards of the time. Want to know a secret that will change your perception of the luxurious dinner parties of the past? In huge dining rooms lit by crystal chandeliers, the atmosphere was so thick you could cut it with a knife. A long table covered with a snow-white tablecloth separated the couple like an icy desert. In this room, the sound of cutlery against porcelain seemed deafeningly loud against the backdrop of oppressive silence. Conversations, if any, were strictly regulated and concerned only the safest and most boring topics. It was forbidden to discuss problems, feelings, money, or anything that might spoil the appetite. The servants standing behind them were silent guardians of this ritual of alienation. The woman had to sit up straight, not touching the back of the chair. Despite her fatigue and the oppressive corset, she mechanically put pieces of exquisite food into her mouth, often without tasting it. Her job was to look beautiful and make sure that the guests or her husband's glasses were full. Any mistake in serving or behavior could provoke a cold, condemning look from her spouse. The silence at the table was not a sign of calm, but a sign of a deep chasm between people. They had nothing to say to each other. All words had long since dried up or been banned. Each of them was immersed in their own thoughts, thousands of miles away from the person sitting opposite them. This emotional deafness was worse than any loud scandals or quarrels. The candles cast long shadows on the walls, creating the illusion of a third person's presence. The shadows danced like ghosts of unspoken grievances and buried hopes for happiness. The woman often caught herself thinking that it would be easier to dine alone. Her husband's presence only intensified her loneliness, making it sharp and unbearable. Sometimes the silence was broken only by the clink of a glass or a dry cough, and the sound made her shudder. At such moments, the tension reached its peak, and it seemed as if the air was about to explode. But nothing happened, and the meal continued in its measured, deathly sequence. It was a slow death of the soul to the clinking of silver and crystal. After dessert, there was the ritual of moving to the living room, which brought no relief. Dinner was only a prelude to a long evening to be spent in the same oppressive company. The woman rose from the table with a sense of duty fulfilled, but with a heavy heart. She had done it again, played her role again, without losing her dignity. The dining table was a symbol of stability and prosperity, but for her it was a scaffold. Here, her right to a voice, to emotions, to lively human communication was executed daily. And the worst thing was that it happened day after day, year after year. Do you think a family can be considered real if its members have forgotten how to talk to each other? The ball season was a time when social pressure reached its absolute ruthless peak. To the sounds of the orchestra and the rustle of silk, real dramas unfolded, hidden from prying eyes. A woman would enter the ballroom on the arm of her husband, sparkling with diamonds and a smile. But her hand, resting on his elbow, was often cold with tension and fear. She knew that this evening hundreds of eyes would be judging her dress, her manners, her ability to keep up appearances. Competition among the ladies was fierce, and every mistake became a cause for schadenfreude. She had to radiate happiness and success, even if an hour ago she had been sobbing in her dressing room. Society did not forgive weakness and despondency. It demanded eternal celebration. Dancing the waltz, she spun around in the arms of men she found indifferent or unpleasant. She had to maintain light social conversation and laugh at unfunny jokes. Her head spun from the stuffiness, the smell of perfume, and the endless flicker of faces. But she couldn't stop. She had to dance until she dropped, until the last chord. Her husband could be in the smoking room or playing cards, forgetting she even existed. She was alone in the crowd, surrounded by people but completely lonely. The glances of other women stung with envy or contempt, depending on her husband's status. It was a battlefield where fans' glances and hints were the weapons. Sometimes she saw happy couples, or at least those who were better at pretending than she was. This caused a sharp pang of jealousy and bitterness. Why did she deserve such a fate? But she quickly suppressed these feelings, adjusted her curls, and continued to smile. The mask grew into her face, becoming a second skin that could not be removed. Balls were a vanity fair where families displayed their wealth and influence. Women were the main exhibits at this exhibition, living proof of their husband's success. The more expensive her jewelry, the higher her spouse was rated in business circles. She felt like a mannequin with all the family jewels hung on her. These nightly festivities sucked the life out of young women, turning them into tired, cynical matrons. The glitter of the chandeliers could not replace the warmth of a home, which they did not have. Behind the outward splendor lay a void that could not be filled with anything. The ballroom was a place of triumph for the family and a place of loneliness for women. Social life was hard work with no vacations or days off. Refusing to attend an important reception could be taken as an insult or a sign of illness. So they went and danced, overcoming pain, longing, and disgust. It was their duty, the price they paid for a luxurious life in a golden cage. Behind the closed doors of her bedroom, as she removed her jewelry, she saw in the mirror a tired woman with a dull look in her eyes. The mask fell away, and all that remained was the naked truth about her unhappy life. Are you ready for the shocking truth about why women were so often ill in that era? Illness was often the only legal way for a woman to get a break and some privacy. Poor health, migraines, and nervous fever were common diagnoses in high society. These ailments allowed a woman to shut herself in her room, draw the curtains, and simply lie in silence. It was an escape from responsibilities, from her husband, from the need to constantly play a role. Doctors at the time readily prescribed bed rest and quiet, without delving into the true causes of the condition. They treated the consequence, not the cause, emotional anguish and social pressure. Women were given the right not to come down for dinner, not to receive guests, and not to perform their marital duties. The patient's room became an inviolable territory where entry was restricted. The dim light of the bedroom, the smell of medicine, and the quiet voice of the nurse created an illusion of care and peace. Here she did not have to wear a corset, do her hair, or force herself to smile. One could simply watch the shadows play on the ceiling and dream of a different life. Illness gave one a legitimate right to weakness, which was unavailable to a healthy woman. However, this refuge had a downside. It could turn into a prison. The famous treatment by rest, popular at the time, prohibited any intellectual activity. Women were not allowed to read, write, draw, or even sew. They were forced to lie motionless for hours, overfed with a milk diet and isolated from the outside world. The room that was supposed to be a refuge turned into a solitary confinement cell with soft walls. The woman found herself completely under the control of doctors and her husband, who decided everything for her. She lost what little autonomy she had, becoming an object of medical manipulation. And yet, many chose this state of affairs just to avoid returning to the ballroom. Sometimes illness was the only way to attract her husband's attention, to elicit even a drop of sympathy from him. But more often than not, it only caused irritation and alienation. The sick wife became a burden, an unnecessary problem in his business life. He hired the best doctors to buy his way out of having to sit at her bedside. Months and years passed in this way, in a darkened room, surrounded by bottles of laudanum and smelling salts. Life passed by while the woman lay in voluntary or forced confinement. It was a slow euthanasia of the soul, sanctioned by society and medicine. Do you think such treatment is a form of psychological abuse? In the next chapter, you will learn what their diaries did not reveal. The writing desk in the corner of the bedroom was perhaps the most intimate place in the entire huge house. Here, by candlelight, the woman confided to paper what she could not tell a single living soul. Her diaries and letters became the only witnesses to her real life, her pain, and her disappointments. The ink absorbed the tears that dripped onto the pages, blurring her neat calligraphic handwriting. She wrote about her loneliness, her husband's coldness, her longing for her children, who were being raised by governesses. She described her fears, her unfulfilled dreams, and her hatred for her gilded cage. These writings were a cry for help that no one was ever meant to hear. Often, women kept such diaries for years, creating a chronicle of their tragedy. Letters to friends or sisters were also subject to internal censorship. It was not acceptable to complain about one's husband. It was considered bad form and treason. Therefore, the letters were full of descriptions of dresses, the weather, and social gossip. The real pain was hidden between the lines, in the trembling of the hand, in the blots. Sometimes correspondence was the only thread connecting a woman to the outside world. Waiting for the postman became the main event of the day. A letter from a loved one could bring a moment of joy, but then even greater anguish would follow. The reply had to be written with restraint, weighing every word. The archives contain many such diaries, full of melancholy and hidden despair. Reading them now, we hear the voices of women who were suffocating in the corsets of social norms. They wrote about the emptiness that surrounded them amid luxury, about how they felt like living dead in their beautiful homes. Paper endured everything. It did not judge or interrupt. The diary was a best friend, psychotherapist, and confessor all rolled into one. It was possible to tell it about falling in love with another man, a love that would never be realized, about dreams of escape that were never meant to come true. These paper witnesses preserve the memory that behind the glittering facade of the Gilded Age lay rivers of tears. They remind us that wealth cannot buy peace of mind and happiness. The story of these women is written in ink of pain on yellowed pages. Every page burned is a lost piece of history that we will never know. The fear of betrayal was a constant, clingy companion in the lives of many married women of that time. But they feared not so much the loss of their husband's love was often absent, as public humiliation. Society turned a blind eye to men's infatuations with actresses or singers. It was considered almost normal. For a man, having a mistress was a sign of status, an extension of his power and wealth. Wives learned of their husband's infidelities through indirect signs. The smell of unfamiliar perfume, bills from jewelers, a coldness in their husband's eyes. They found unfamiliar hairpins in the carriage or heard whispers behind their backs at balls. But they had to remain silent and pretend that nothing was happening. To make a scene meant admitting defeat and becoming a laughing stock for the whole world. This forced blindness destroyed her self-esteem, turning her into a paranoid. She began to look for flaws in herself, thinking that she was not beautiful or smart enough. She exhausted herself with diets and ordered new dresses, trying to regain her husband's interest. But it was all in vain. She was a wife, a possession, and there was passion and novelty. The nights when her husband did not come home were the worst. She lay in the dark, imagining him in the arms of another woman, and this imagination was torture. Jealousy was mixed with feelings of helplessness and complete dependence. She could not leave, could not file for divorce without losing everything: her children, her status, her livelihood. The fear of being replaced by someone younger and more beautiful haunted women constantly. They saw their friends aging, their husbands losing interest in them. This made them cling to their fading youth with redoubled force. The battle for their husband's attention was a war they knew they would lose. In these nighttime rooms, a quiet hatred was born for the one who was supposed to be a protector and support. Betrayal became a familiar backdrop to marriage, poisoning the air in the house. Children often felt this tension, growing up in an atmosphere of lies and unspoken words. Family happiness was just a pretty picture for a Christmas card. Betrayal killed a woman's soul slowly but surely, robbing her of her self-confidence. She remained alone in her golden cage, while her husband lived a full life. This was the price women paid for stability and social status. No amount of money in the world could compensate for the humiliation of being just a backup option in your own home. For a society lady, old age was not a time of wisdom and peace, but a final sentence. With the loss of her beauty, a woman lost her main currency on the social market. She became invisible, a shadow in her own home, which once shone with lights. Her husband, if he was still alive, finally moved into his own rooms or club. Mirrors, which had previously been her main allies, were now mercilessly covered or ignored. Each new wrinkle was a tragedy, a reminder that her time was up. Attempts to rejuvenate herself with cosmetics and tricks looked pathetic and sometimes grotesque. A society that worshipped youth wrote off aging ladies. Children grew up and left the family nest, repeating the fate of their parents. Sons went away to college and pursued careers. Daughters got married and moved into their husbands' homes. The huge mansion became empty, too big for one old woman. The silence in the rooms became ringing, almost palpable. Now her days were ruled not by visits and balls, but by medication schedules and doctor's appointments. She sat by the window, watching life rush by in carriages and cars. Memories of the past, often embellished, became her only reality. She sorted through old letters and dresses she would never wear again. During those years, many women turned to religion or spiritualism, seeking solace in mysticism. Seances were a popular pastime, providing the illusion of connection with the departed. It was a pitiful substitute for communication for those who were deprived of it in real life. Loneliness became absolute, all-consuming. Sometimes they tried to play the role of grand dames, lecturing young people and clinging to old rules of etiquette. But the world was changing rapidly, and they looked like living fossils in it. Their values, their manners, their views seemed ridiculous and outdated. They were monuments to a bygone era that had been forgotten to be demolished. They often died as they had lived, alone in their luxurious bedrooms. Nurses and doctors were nearby, but rarely were there loving people holding their hands. Their heirs waited for the will to be read, appraising the antiques. It was a sad end to a brilliant life full of compromises and hidden tears. When we walk through the museum estates of the Gilded Age today, we see only the shell of that life. We admire the wood carvings, Tiffany-stained glass, and heavy velvet curtains. But these rooms are silent about what really happened in them over 100 years ago. They have been carefully washed clean of traces of human suffering and turned into beautiful decorations. Today, we can only guess at the depth of their experiences by reading between the lines of their letters. Their voices are quiet, drowned out by the noise of time and the official story of success. But if you listen closely, you can hear their footsteps in the creaking parquet floor of the old mansion. The footsteps of a woman walking around her golden cage, dreaming of freedom. Their experience is a lesson for us, a reminder of the value of freedom of choice and the right to be oneself. No luxury is worth losing one's soul and living a life in fear. They paid that price for us so that we could appreciate what we have today. Their suffering was not in vain if we are able to understand and feel it. These night rooms, where fear replaced romance, are finally opening their doors to us. Light is shed on the dark corners of history, and the ghosts of the past find peace. We look at them not with envy, but with deep compassion and respect. They were prisoners of their time, beautiful and unhappy. History is not just dates and battles. It is above all the feelings of living people, and the feelings of the women of the Age of Splendor deserve to be remembered. May their silent cry finally be heard through the centuries. We have lifted the heavy velvet curtains and peered into the inner sanctum of a Victorian mansion, the bedroom, where real human dramas were hidden behind the glitter of gold. These stories remind us that happiness is not measured in carats of diamonds or the number of rooms in a house. How did these stories about the golden cages of the past make you feel? What would you like to learn more about in our next issues? The secret languages of fans, the fates of children in these huge houses, or the fashion that killed? Write your suggestions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out on new journeys into the mysteries of history.